forged on the gridiron in September. Perfected in the magic of March. For the fans who love the crunch of the pads, prefer a dunk, and expect nothing but the best. It's Bigger 10. Here's Steve Dace.
And greetings. Welcome to another episode of Bigger 10. I am Steve Dace. He is my co-host, but never partner. That's an important thing to remember. Aaron McIntyre, good to see you, brother. How are you?
Doing well, especially looking at the forecast the next week and a half or so. I mean, we're getting off pretty easy compared to the rest of the country, it seems
I know.
right now.
And I know a lot of this is happening in the Big Ten region right now. You guys are getting absolutely hammered. Somehow Iowa ended up missing this massive storm that is wrecking so much of the country. We've got college basketball games here in the Big Ten getting postponed. Wisconsin couldn't get out of Champaign last night when it probably wanted to get the hell out of there after that one. They saw enough of Kofi Coburn. They don't need to spend another night there in Champaign. So we are very thankful to not be caught in this winter wrecking ball. In fact, we get to kind of look ahead to fall, because this week we're going to spend the program looking at National Signing Day. The recruiting classes are now done for both the early and traditional signing day. And to me, I think there are 5 big takeaways as we begin, Aaron, the big 5 here on Bigger 10, looking at recruiting for college football in the Big Ten in the class of 2022. Let's start with the class rankings themselves. This is how 24/7's composite rankings, this is where they take the composite of themselves, rivals, and ESPN. This is their composite recruiting class rankings. Ohio State comes in 4th overall, first in the Big Ten, 3rd straight top 5 class for the Buckeyes. Penn State matches its highest rated recruiting class since the recruiting service era began around 2000 at number 6. This is the 4th top 15 class in the last 5 years for Michigan under Jim Harbaugh. They're at number 8. Indiana has its highest rated class ever at 21. Michigan State, its highest rated class since 2016. And then we finally get to a Big Ten West team. There are your Iowa Hawkeyes at 30, Rutgers at 32, Maryland 34. That snaps a streak of top 25 classes for Maryland. They had, I think, 3 or 4 in a row. Purdue at 37. Nebraska also snaps a streak of 4 straight top 25 classes. We'll talk more about that here in a second. Wisconsin, which had consecutive top 25 classes for the first time ever, they fall to 44th. Illinois 45th. Minnesota 48th. I think a lot of people would have figured they would have taken better advantage of that breakout season in 2019. And Northwestern, as it typically does, bringing up the rear at 50. Anything stand out to you about those class rankings for 2022?
You mentioned, excuse me if I can actually speak English without having a stroke here. You mentioned Nebraska. We'll talk about them later. I think 3 others stand out to me. It's Indiana, which you would have thought maybe after a disappointing and really abjectly disappointing last season, that might have had some impact, but goodness gracious, they're in, I think, a top 25 recruiting class. That's great news for them. Rutgers, I think Rutgers and Maryland, actually, you can thank for what we'll be talking about, I think, actually next on the Bigger 5. The overall average recruiting rankings for the Big Ten year by year. Rutgers, if Rutgers and Maryland can land top 30 or 40 recruiting classes perennially, that's a huge freaking deal for the league. And so Rutgers really surprised me there. And then lastly, Wisconsin, down at 44. I'm not sure what explains that. Usually I'm used to seeing them, if not in the top 20, but at least the top 35 or so. That kind of surprised me as well.
Let's get to, you mentioned it, the overall class rank. And look at this 5-year trend here for the Big Ten. So in 2018, the average recruiting class rank in the Big Ten was 36.1, 2019, 34, 2020, 36.3, 2021, 35. Those numbers are not great and pretty stable, right? And I think we know where most of those numbers are coming from, because Michigan, Ohio State are top 10 every year. Penn State's top 15 every year. So you know a lot of this is coming from the Big Ten West side of things, right? 2022, the Big Ten jumped to 29.5. That's a pretty healthy jump there. And some of that is Penn State, with its best tied for its best class ever. But a lot of that is from the non-traditional programs like Indiana that we just talked about getting a top 25 class, Aaron.
Yeah, and recruiting rankings, it's a good starting point. It's obviously not the ending point, but it's a good starting place for us to kind of judge the overall health of the league from year to year and what it could be in a few years. But to see a jump of 5.5 points there year over year, something has changed. You mentioned Indiana, but even those traditionally bottom feeder or what have been bottom feeder schools, Maryland and Rutgers, I mentioned earlier, for them to do well recruiting, I think that helps the overall rankings kind of inch up there as well. And hopefully will end up helping the league here in a few years as well.
Some superlatives, some of the bests from the 2022 recruiting class. We'll go through these on an individual basis. Ohio State signed the #1 overall player in the country at not one, but 2 different positions. I mentioned before, Penn State has tied for its best ever class in the recruiting service era, which is, again, back to about 2000 or so. Indiana signing its best ever class. Michigan State signing its best class since 2016. But be careful, that 2016 class is what wrecked Mark D'Antonio's tenure.
Yep.
Rutgers' second best class ever in the recruiting service era. It's the first time your Hawkeyes have ever signed 2 top 100 overall defensive recruits nationally in the same class. Purdue signing its highest rated quarterback recruit since Kyle Orton 20 years ago. What, if anything, stands out from that list for you, brother?
Purdue. I mean, we've talked about Purdue quarterbacks. None of them have been like world beaters. I mean, we talked about Aiden O'Connell this year, I believe, having a quietly good season. Guys, if they get like an incredible quarterback, like an outstanding quarterback, not just, we're not just talking about above average.
A system guy, but like a pro.
But exactly.
Yeah.
The system that they run, guys, if they can get another David Bell, which who knows what they're going to be doing there. But really, the system that they run with a great quarterback, I feel like Lucy with the football. I thought this was going to be the case with them a couple of years ago when they were loaded with David Bell and the guy who plays for the Cardinals now. I can't remember his name already. Wrecked and barely.
Rondale Moore.
Thank you.
Yep.
I thought this was going to be the case then, but I will just hedge it by saying this: they could be really, really dangerous with a great quarterback.
And Jeff Braun proved that he still is one of the best play callers in college football, and having 3 defensive coordinators works, apparently. So some other schools, hey, right now my school is looking for a DC. Maybe we need to hire 3. It worked at West Lafayette this year. All right, let's get to Nebraska. And this is the first time in 5 years that Nebraska has not signed a top 25 recruiting class, but they did put a lot of their efforts into the transfer portal. Now, for the first time ever, 24/7 Sports has done a ranking of transfer portal classes, and Nebraska's was rated the best in the Big Ten. I think they were like 9th or 10th nationally. So they have invested a lot in that transfer portal. It's obvious that Scott Frost needs instant help. He's coaching for his livelihood this fall. I think we all recognize that. So it can be done. You can go to the transfer portal for one of 2 reasons. You're Mel Tucker, and they forced you to coach year 1 over Zoom because of COVID. You're desperate to replenish your ranks, and you strike lightning in a bottle as a rebuild, and it works. Or you can try it because you're desperate to make a short-term dent to save your long-term job. And here's the thing: this really means Nebraska threw this recruiting class away, essentially, for the transfer portal. So if I'm a Nebraska fan, I really, really want Scott Frost to succeed this fall, Aaron, because if he does not, you're putting the next coach behind the 8 ball from a roster standpoint, because you forsook this recruiting class. You went to the transfer portal not as a supplement for your recruiting, but almost in place of it. So you really need Frost to hit this year so that you don't see all that turnover after a lost class with a new coach coming in.
Yeah, there's a mixed record in doing this. Lovie Smith doesn't coach anymore for the Illini, but he had that one great season that was put together almost exclusively. I think it was the very first year of the portal, after the transfer portal. But he doesn't have a job anymore. I think a lot of this is going to hinge upon, And I want to say with Scott Frost, if you can't coach the guys that you recruited yourself, I'm not really sure if you're going to be able to coach the guys that come in. So this kind of strikes me in a slightly different way of what my analysis was on your Wolverines going into last season. If there's a change and if there is going to be success, like actual successful season, what Michigan fans want to expect, it's going to be because the players decided so. And I still think that rang out true. I think a lot of it was, some of it was Jim Harbaugh just deciding, okay, we're going to, just get down to brass tacks here. I think that's going to be what happens at Nebraska because Scott Frost so far, he hasn't been able to show that or prove that he can teach consistently or consistency within his own players that he's recruited. So, maybe these guys can come together from all around the country from the transfer portal and mesh right away, but that's going to be a tall order.
Finally, let's talk about Illinois. They got 5 wins. They beat the aforementioned Nebraska Cornhuskers and had another, nice win in there in the Big Ten as well. If you're looking for signs of life kind of below the Mendoza line of the of who will generate the majority of headlines, this is a subtle but I think important step for Illinois. Illinois signed more of the top 20 players in their home state. Now, it's not as talent-rich as it was 20 or 30 years ago, but it is still one of the most talent-rich states in our footprint. Illinois signed more of the top 20 prospects in its home state in this class than it had the last 4 classes combined. So if you're, it's not just they got to the 5 wins, and if it weren't for some fluky stuff on the last week, they probably would have gotten a bowl bid with that APR. All right. So they were knocking on the door to a bowl game in Bert's first year, and now they come back and they establish some legitimacy with in-state recruiting. And I don't know that, you can win Big Ten championships anymore off of Illinois talent. I do know you can go to bowl games with it, though, at the very least. And so if I'm an Illini fan, I'm looking at that as a subtle but important step for the program.
Yeah, and if I'm Iowa, if I'm Wisconsin, if I'm even Indiana, I'm looking at that and I'm going, those guys are a lot of our, we just counted on being able to, especially Iowa has gotten some fairly good recruits from Illinois in the last probably decade or so, because Illinois has been, by virtue mostly of Illinois
pretty
being
much open
down.
for business.
Exactly. Yeah. You're looking at those, if you're developmental schools like Iowa, Wisconsin, Indiana, you're looking at Bert closing down that state and going, this could be a little bit of a problem for us. We might have to go and open up some other pipelines. So, good for him. That's one of the first things. I like the way you couch that there. Some beneath the surface, subtle signs of life for the Illini. One of the first orders of business, lock down your own state.
And he knows how to build a program. And that's the thing on Lovie. Everybody agrees Lovie Smith's one of the best defensive coaches of his generation, but he just never fully embraced the recruiting game. And so you're right. If you're Illinois, if you get rated for, a top receiver or two, or some elite skill player goes to Michigan or Ohio State, you can live with that. But you can't be a successful program and have the programs that you just mentioned going in there and rating your state for talent. You've got to stop the Iowas and Minnesotas. PJ Fleck obviously has the state of Illinois ties. You've got to stop those teams from coming into your state. So this was an important, subtle, important first step for Illinois. We'll come back, play our weekly game of Would You Rather here in just a moment. And we're off. Let's get it started. Our weekly game of Would You Rather here on Bigger 10. Aaron, I have one for you. Would you rather get a full ride scholarship to a group of 5 program, so like the Sun Belt, the MAC, etc.? Would you rather get a full ride scholarship to a group of 5 program if you were a college football recruit, or take a chance by walking on to your favorite Big Ten team?
I think I would. I think if my goal is to play football, which a lot of these recruits, let's just be honest, I know I'm really breaking some big news to you. A lot of these guys just want to play football, and much kind of to the detriment, as we talked about before, with the transfer portal and then ending up with no spot in the musical chairs. But if my goal is to play football at a high level, I would take a chance and walk on. Because here's the reality, too. If you're good enough to play and get a scholarship, a full-ride scholarship at a group of 5 team, surely you can weasel your way into a special teams spot somewhere on your favorite Big Ten football team, maybe not at Michigan or Ohio State, but the rest of the league, you can weasel your way in and then maybe carve out a role at some point in your 4 years there. And if you work hard enough, you know what? The opportunities to be seen at the next level, probably a lot bigger at a Big Ten school than a Group of 5 school. Next one is for you. Would you rather watch the biathlon in person without a mask in Zhangjiakou, China in a couple of weeks, or watch your favorite team play basketball at center court in a big game but wearing 2 masks?
I'd wear 7 masks if it meant being continuing to be here in the U.S. I am the ugly American, all right, which is one of the reasons why I hate masks, all right? But I'd wear 7, 8, 9, 14 of them if it meant I got to stay here in the beloved homeland rather than going over there. I like pretend Chinese authoritarianism that we're doing in the U.S. nowadays rather than the real thing, brother. All right. This one's for you. Would you rather be a college football coach at your favorite school or an NFL coach for your favorite team, which means you don't have to worry about recruiting? There's a lot of conversation about this right now. Okay, so which would you rather be?
This is just personally me. I'm not a huge people person. You know, I can be extroverted when I need to be, and I can be warm when I need to be.
When exactly is that? I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. Go ahead. Yes.
Not right now. Listen here. No. No, I would rather be the NFL coach. I would much rather be the NFL coach because then the agreement is you guys are getting paid for this. All right. I don't have to come into your house and please your mama and please your 17-year-old butt or 18-year-old butt and try to impress your 18-year-old. I have a hard enough time relating to people who are 3, 4, 5 years younger than me. If I was 40, 50, 60 years old and I'm trying to relate to somebody 40 years younger than me, I don't know. Maybe it works in reverse at that point, but I would much rather be the NFL coach. What about you?
I definitely prefer college football, but gosh, this is going to make me sound so shallow. I have had anxiety attacks thinking about going on all these recruiting visits inside the home and eating all of that different kinds of foods and spices and stuff. And, does it make me sick? Those things. What happens if you go to somebody's house? Like I can't digest curry at all. Instantly makes me throw up, or the other end. What happens if you go to somebody's house, man? The mama says, "Hey man, here's my curry tuna dish." And you're like, "I can't eat that, man. It gives me just explosive diarrhea." You don't want to say that, right? So then you go ahead and eat it, and you're like that scene in Dumb and Dumber. Be right out. All right, you know what I'm talking about? I mean, nah.
You leave their house, and you're never going back there.
I left
again.
a little piece of myself.
Yeah,
exactly. I worry about stuff like that, man. And the NFL, I don't have to worry about any of that. Although I love the idea of leading my team out of the tunnel with the fight song, and it's just the recruiting aspect. Yeah. I don't even like covering it as a fan, let alone having to do it, All right.
This last one is for you.
Okay.
Would you rather have your top 3 guards go 0 for 18 from the field or watch Les Miserables 2 times in a row?
This sounds a little personal.
Not that I have any experience with that.
I mean, we've had
Iowa's guards against Penn State. They went 0 for 18. 0 for 18.
Hey, we recruited a 5-star shooting guard that was the #1 shooter in his class, and he went 1 for 17 from 3 over 3 games. How many of those games do you think we won, by the way? Just guess.
0.
Zero's the number.
I'm sorry. I got to push back on that a little bit, too. I mean, that's like saying, yeah, well, I bought an Aston Martin, and I had to change the tire on it.
We thought we were getting an Aston Martin. Instead, we got like a, Prius. But, man, I think I'd rather watch Les Miserables twice in a row because I'm just not emotionally invested in it, so I don't care. I would not be getting mad watching that. You know what I'm saying? Plus, I just go to sleep. But, yeah, I can see how that would be quite irritating, indeed. We'll come back. We've got our Twitter poll results and our feedback of the week here in a moment. This week's Twitter poll results. So I thought, let's go off the beaten path with this question, if you're okay with it. We asked the audience, if you were a college football recruit, which of these Big Ten schools would you be the most interested in taking an official visit to? And I tried to take 4, kind of schools beneath the radar. Northwestern actually won this resoundingly. Illinois at 46.7%, Illinois at 28.2%, Indiana at 17.8%, and Rutgers at 7.3%. What do you think of those results?
I think I know why. I was dumbfounded too.
Is it that new facility they have?
Yeah. I would like to see that in person. Yeah, that's a good point, actually.
Yeah.
I would say probably Illinois or Indiana at this point.
See, I could just drive by. Yeah. I can just drive over to the north side of Chicago and see that. You know what I can't do without taking an official visit? Hang out with Bert for a weekend. Yeah. What do you think that's like, huh?
Interesting.
I bet it's at least a little bit interesting.
Yep.
Yeah, so I probably would have voted for Illinois. All right, let's get to our feedback of the week. Samuel asks, which coach do you think is the best recruiter in the Big Ten? So, Ryan Day's got 3 top 5 classes, man, but really, how hard is it to recruit at Ohio State? I mean, I think they've had one class not ranked in the top 10 in a decade or something. All right, So, and then you have Michigan. For goodness sakes, Jim Harbaugh last year was about to get fired, signed a top 10 class with a 5-star quarterback. This year, tried to get a job in the NFL, signed a top 10 class. I mean, how hard is it to recruit at Michigan?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I guess if we were giving this out for this year, doesn't Tom Allen have to win it? And it's not just that class, but holding it together while the friggin' team imploded on the field. Do you know how many of those they got like 4 or 5 4-star kids in that class? I guarantee all of them were getting called by other programs saying, why are you going there? It was a flash in the pan, one-hit wonder. See, look at the team this year. I mean, they suck again. So if I'm going to do it for just this year, and I'm going to give it to Tom Allen.
That's a pretty good answer. I don't agree with it at all, and this is
that's so smarmy. I loved it.
This is
pretty good answer. I just don't agree with any of it. Thank you.
This is actually I'm surprised you didn't think about this. This is actually one of the easiest questions we've had posed to us here on Bigger 10. I think without a doubt it's Franklin. Franklin is I'm not talking about Coach Franklin. I'm not talking about Ben Franklin. He's probably the best recruiter in college football. Ba-doom ching. I'm here all night. Try the curry.
Yeah.
I like your answer though. That's a good point. People who should be good recruiters, based on their personality and honestly the results on the field. PJ Fleck, that's one that we probably didn't talk about enough there. You mentioned it in passing.
I would have never guessed.
But 46,
once he established the program, he'd have a class that was hovering around 50th in the country. You would think with that persona, the one thing he could do is recruit, right? Yeah, I'm really, and some of it is, remember, a lot of these rankings are heavily influenced by the amount of kids you need to sign in a class too, right? Volume tends to overtake, quantity tends to overtake quality. But having a class that's hovering around 50th in the country, I did not foresee that from him, especially given some of the success he's had. I mean, they had 11 wins 2 years ago. They had 9 wins this year, and they were about 3 plays away from 11 wins again, right? So there you go. All right, that'll do it for this week's episode of Bigger 10. Don't forget to follow us at Bigger 10 on Twitter to keep up to date on what we think about all things Big 10 and more. Like, rate, subscribe, share, 5-star review, whichever applies, and however you watch, like here on YouTube, or listen, whether it's iTunes or elsewhere, so we can please find more Big 10 fans like you. Until the next time, for Aaron McIntyre, I'm Steve Deace. We'll see you then.